For years, leaders inside the Soviet Union faced a problem that made no sense at first. The economy felt broken. People complained constantly. Shelves were often empty. But when leaders tried to change it, the situation didn't improve. It destabilized, not all at once, not immediately, but enough to raise a dangerous question. What if the problem wasn't that the system didn't work, but that it worked in a way change couldn't survive? By the late 1970s, the Soviet economy was not collapsing. Factories still produced. People still had jobs. Cities were still supplied. There were shortages, but not famine. Delays, but not chaos. Life felt heavy and frustrating, yet oddly stable. That stability did not come from efficiency. It came from design. The system was built to prevent breakdown at almost any cost. When one area failed, pressure was absorbed elsewhere. When something went wrong, the impact was spread out, delayed, or hidden inside the plan. Failure existed. It was just redistributed. The economy was not designed to maximize comfort or choice. It was designed to keep functioning under stress, and by that standard, it was succeeding. At the same time, the costs of that stability were becoming impossible to ignore. Consumers waited in lines. Managers scrambled for inputs. Innovation lagged behind expectations. Nothing was easy. Plans were met, but through workarounds. Targets were reached, but with waste. Security existed, but frustration accumulated. The system was not broken enough to collapse, but too rigid to improve. That is a dangerous equilibrium, because stagnation is not neutral. The longer a system survives without changing, the more behavior, expectations, and institutions lock into place. Each year of survival made adjustment harder. To reformers, the symptoms seemed obvious. Empty shelves meant failure. Slow innovation meant bad incentives. Public dissatisfaction meant the system itself was wrong. What they missed was the coordination underneath. Prices didn't move, but deliveries did. Firms didn't compete, but plans aligned production. Choice was limited, but survival was predictable. The economy looked inefficient when judged by market standards. Internally, it was optimized for reliability. That reliability depended on expectations staying fixed. Once those expectations began to shift, coordination became fragile. This is where the paradox sharpened. The Soviet economy could absorb pressure. It could survive shocks. What it could not do easily was change direction. Meaningful reform requires uncertainty, new rules, new risks, new signals. But uncertainty was exactly what the system was built to suppress. Partial change was especially dangerous. It loosened coordination before a new one existed. If reform failed, the system wouldn't weaken gradually. It would unravel. If coordination depends on fixed expectations, what happens when reform forces everyone to stop believing the old rules? If this way of understanding history, through systems, incentives, and coordination, feels natural to you, this channel is built around that lens. Central planning was not one master plan controlling everything. It was a coordination system. At its core was a simple exchange. The state promised inputs, enterprises promised outputs. Factories did not decide what to make, they were assigned targets. In return, they were guaranteed labor, materials, transport, and buyers. Demand uncertainty disappeared. Prices mattered less than fulfillment. A plan was not a suggestion, it was a promise. Steel flowed because machinery plants expected it. Machinery flowed because transport planners assumed it. Each link moved because everyone believed the next link would behave the same way tomorrow. This coordination was powerful, but it was conditional. It worked only as long as expectations stayed fixed. Once belief wavered, links did not fail one by one. They failed together. Inside this system, managers behaved rationally. They hoarded inputs because shortages were constant. They inflated requests because missing targets was punished. They focused on quantity over quality because quotas measured volume. None of this was irrational. If a manager failed to meet the plan, penalties followed. If they exceeded it too much, next year's target increased. So managers aimed for safe success, not improvement. Innovation was dangerous. A new method could disrupt output, and disruption mattered more than inefficiency. A factory that produced low-quality goods still met the plan. A factory that experimented and missed targets did not. This behavior stabilized the system, but it also made it brittle. Managers optimized for plan reliability, not adaptability. Once targets became uncertain, hoarding and inflated requests stopped cushioning shocks and started amplifying them. Coordination moved through layers of ministries. Each ministry oversaw a sector: steel, energy, transport, agriculture. Their role was not to optimize, it was to keep flows moving. When a factory lacked inputs, prices did not adjust. Instead, managers negotiated. Phone calls were made, favors were exchanged. Problems traveled upward until resources were reassigned. This created two systems at once: formal plans on paper, informal coordination in practice. Personal networks mattered because they filled gaps when plans fell short. The economy ran on documents and relationships, but those relationships depended on stable rules. Once expectations began to change, favors became riskier. Promises lost credibility. Informal coordination weakened just when it was most needed. The system lasted because it was resilient. If one supplier failed, another compensated. If a target was unrealistic, it was quietly adjusted. If shortages appeared, buffers absorbed them. Redundancy was intentional. The economy survived by spreading failure rather than eliminating it. That kept output steady but distorted information. Buffers prevented learning. Local fixes hid systemic problems. By the time issues reached planners, they were already widespread. Stability hid fragility. And when reform arrived, it removed buffers before a replacement system existed. If coordination depended on fixed expectations and hidden buffers, what happens when reform removes both at the same time? Reform did not arrive slowly. Expectations changed almost overnight. Institutions did not. Plans were softened. Targets became flexible. Enterprises were told they had more freedom, but no stable alternative system to rely on. The old economy worked because rules were assumed to last. Reform made those rules feel temporary, and behavior adjusts faster than structures. When rules feel provisional, people stop optimizing for the future. They protect the present. That shift happened immediately. Coordination decayed with a lag. By the time institutions reacted, behavior had already moved on. Managers responded the only way they could. If targets might change, hoarding increased. If prices might move, deliveries slowed. If penalties weakened, commitments loosened. These behaviors had once stabilized the system. Now they compounded uncertainty. Each protective move made the system less predictable for everyone else. Trust eroded non-linearly. Inflated requests overwhelmed planners. Inventories vanished into private stockpiles. Production chains stalled as confidence fell. Nothing illegal had to happen. The system was breaking because everyone was acting rationally. Once coordination slipped past a threshold, recovery became impossible. Reform introduced limited market mechanisms. Some prices moved. Some firms could sell excess output. Autonomy increased unevenly, but partial markets didn't clarify incentives. They contradicted them. Prices signaled scarcity, but inputs were still planned. Autonomy suggested freedom, but access remained controlled. Responsibility increased, authority did not. Managers now faced two logics at once and could not tell which would be punished. Rational caution became paralysis. Coordination weakened faster than adaptation because no one knew which rules would still apply tomorrow. The first thing to collapse was not production, it was information. Under the old system, data was distorted but stable. Under reform, it became unstable and unreliable. Firms hid output. Requests lost meaning. Reports stopped matching reality. Planners could no longer tell which failures were local and which were systemic. Authority depends on visibility. Once information failed, decisions became guesses. Every intervention risked making things worse. The system was now flying blind. Reform introduced uncertainty faster than coordination could be rebuilt. The old system required belief. The new system required trust. Reform weakened belief before trust existed. By the time leaders recognized the damage, alignment was already gone. Reversing reform was as dangerous as continuing it. Change did not fail because it went too far. It failed because it arrived too fast, too partially, and too late. If reform destroyed coordination before a new system could form, was collapse the result of failure or of timing that could no longer be fixed? Once coordination unraveled, there was no safe way back. Restoring strict planning required renewed belief, but belief had already been broken. Continuing reform required trust, but trust had not yet formed. Every option carried risk. Tightening control threatened open resistance. Loosening further threatened complete breakdown. Time itself became the enemy. Every delay hardened expectations. Every pause signaled uncertainty. Even waiting became a decision, and a costly one. The system was no longer choosing between good and bad paths. It was choosing between incompatible ones. You could not simply announce stability again. As economic coordination weakened, political pressures intensified. Enterprises demanded autonomy. Regions demanded control over resources. Officials blamed each other for shortages. Economic reform fragmented authority. Political fragmentation slowed decisions. Slower decisions worsened shortages. Those shortages fueled demands for even more change. The loop reinforced itself. Policies meant to stabilize production reshaped power. Power struggles delayed economic coordination. Coordination failures deepened political conflict. The system was no longer just struggling. It was amplifying its own instability. It is tempting to ask whether a smarter reform could have worked, but this assumes the system still had room to experiment. It did not. The Soviet economy had already used its slack to survive. Redundancy, buffers, and reserves were consumed just to keep production steady. There was no excess capacity left to absorb trial and error. Any reform large enough to matter disrupted the foundations. Any reform small enough to be safe arrived too late. Markets require time to build trust. Plans require belief to function. Reform destroyed belief faster than trust could grow. The Soviet economy did not collapse because it was useless. It collapsed because it was misaligned with the kind of change now required. Its strength had always been coordination under pressure. Its weakness was adaptation under uncertainty. Those are not opposites, they are trade-offs. A system built to survive shocks can struggle to survive transformation. The central contradiction is simple. The Soviet economy worked precisely because it suppressed uncertainty. Reform required releasing uncertainty. Once released, it could not be contained. The same mechanisms that once ensured survival now prevented recovery. The system could function, but only if left alone. The moment it tried to change itself, it undermined the coordination it depended on. This is why change made it worse. History is not only shaped by systems that fail outright. It is shaped by effective systems that cannot adapt without breaking themselves. If this way of understanding history, through incentives, coordination, and unintended consequences, resonates with you, this channel is built around that lens. The Soviet Union did not collapse because it stopped working. It collapsed because it could not change how it worked without losing what held it together.